Are you gonna do my wrap up for me? Hi, my name is Adriana and today I will be doing my reading wrap up for the month of November. In November I read a total of 6 books, 2 of which were audiobooks and 4 of which were physical. I'm just gonna go ahead and start with the first book I read in November, which was Prisoners of Geography, 10 maps that explain everything about the world. It is broken into, go figure, 10 sections focusing on different regions of the world, from China to the US to Russia to Africa. So just breaking up the world and talking about the geopolitics of each area and how the geography of that area has affected its political and economic status as of today. And while it was really interesting to look at, it is not written by an academic, which is fine. It's written by a BBC journalist, and his bias is really interesting and very strong in a lot of parts of this book. He seems to go pretty easy on colonialists, but is very, very hard on communists. I guess if you are going to pick this up, just be aware. I mean, he does mention colonialism. He talks about it fairly extensively in the China portion of this book, as well as the United States portion, and a little bit in the European portion, but he speaks about colonialism in more of an academically distant way, and he is very not academically distant about communists. So it is what it is. He has bias, we all do, but there is some still pretty good, fun information in here if you are interested in picking it up and learning a little bit more about geography. If I come across a better geography book, I will be sure to let you know. I just don't really read that much nonfiction, especially in the geography realm. The next book I read was A Spy in the Struggle. This was my pick for the Shelf This Book Club, hosted by Is Bailey Reading. It is a FBI spy thriller novel about a young woman who is hired by the FBI to infiltrate this group of what she's told is black extremists. And as she gets to know this group that she's supposed to be spying on, she realizes they are definitely less extreme than what she was told, and she gets kind of wrapped up in this big conspiracy, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed it a lot, and it was a good kind of juicy book to talk about during book club, so I think it just kind of worked out well overall, and I would definitely recommend this book. The next one I read was actually an audiobook, and that is The Heart Principle, the third in the Kiss Quotient series. This was definitely kind of middle of the road for me as far as the trilogy goes. I didn't like it as much as Kiss Quotient, but I did like it more than Bright Test. It did feature another autistic lead, a woman who is a professional musician, I guess, violin player, and her long-term boyfriend comes to her and says that he wants to have an open relationship before he decides if he wants to marry her or not, which, gag, that was one of the hardest parts about like listening to this book, is like how trash a lot of the people around her were. And so just be warned about that. She deals with a lot of trash people in her life. But because her boyfriend decided for her that they were going to have an open relationship, she decides that she's going to go out and try to have a one-night stand. And this one-night stand turns into a relationship. A nice, good, healthy relationship. But obviously they have their twists and turns and everything else. One thing I really didn't like about this book was I don't like reading unhealthy sister-sister relationships. Like, it pains me a lot as someone who's put a lot of work into their sister relationship. I hate reading about dysfunctional sibling relationships. I enjoyed the book overall. It had some very good steam, and it was, really fun and mostly lighthearted, but I did have a couple here and there. So I think I ended up giving this one about like 3.5 stars. It's kind of middle of the road, but like, yeah, I like it. It was good. The next book I read was Burn by Patrick Ness. I enjoyed this book so much more than I thought I would. It is so good, and I have a full review of it on my channel. It's non-spoiler if you want to check that out. It is a YA dragon fantasy, and so when I saw that whole package, I kind of thought I knew what I was in for, and this just subverted every expectation I had. It felt so fresh and so fun and just really good. I just really enjoyed it a lot. I had so much fun. I ended up giving this 5 stars because I literally don't think I would change a single thing about this book. Everything in it, I just enjoyed a lot, and I think served the story really well. I also had a really good time reading this, I guess, critically, like delving into the symbolism of the time in which it was set and the area in which it was set. I enjoyed so much about this book because not only is it just fun on the surface, there's also kind of a few levels that you could dig into if you really wanted to. But it's just a fun story at the start, which I think is the first thing a book should be, is just a good story. The next book I listened to was Marrow Thieves. It is a Kobo original story that my library happened to have, and I just kind of picked it up on a whim and listened to it just to see. And it is a beautifully written story. It's a speculative fiction about a future in which most of the human race has lost the ability to dream, with the exception of the indigenous population of the Americas. And so the indigenous people start being hunted down and experimented on, and so we're past that point and we're into now where a lot of the Native Americans and Indigenous Canadians have been killed off in all these experiments, and there are still pockets of resistance living in the wilderness. So we follow one of these kind of found families on their journey to survive and the different people they run into. I don't know how much more I can say about this besides it was just beautifully written. Even though it's such a harrowing story, it just feels, I don't know, like it feels like a form of resistance just existing as it is. Just all of these young adults plunged into this terrible situation and finding a way to survive and finding a way to grow up in such a terrible mess, I guess. I would probably not recommend this as an audiobook, at least if you're like me and you struggle with keeping up with multiple characters, because I did struggle with keeping up. There are quite a few characters that are really delved into, and you get to hear the backstory of, I think, all of the found family that we're in. I think there's like 7 or 8 of them, so it was a little bit more difficult for me to keep track of that audibly, but I think I would have really enjoyed it physically, and I might honestly try to pick it up physically at some point. But yeah, this was a 3.5 star for me, but only because I was listening to it instead of reading it. I think I would have enjoyed it more had I read it with my eyeballs instead of my ears. And finally, to wrap up my month of November, I finished off with Daughter of Sparta. I actually finished this like December 3rd or something, but I mostly read it in November. So this is a book that I featured in my most recent vlog. I read it mostly over Thanksgiving. It was a pretty good one to read for a vlog because you can see me starting out on a high and then slowly watch me enjoy it less and less with each check-in I have of this book. So it is supposed to be a Daphne and Apollo retelling. For those who don't know, the Daphne and Apollo myth is the god Apollo gets struck with one of Cupid's arrows and falls in love with this nymph named Daphne. She's not into it. She doesn't want anything to do with Apollo, but he's like love mad, so he chases her around all the countryside and eventually exhausts this nymph, and she prays to her river god dad to just help her escape and get out of this situation. So he ends up turning her into a tree, and that's the story. So it's kind of a tragic story of toxic masculinity, maybe? I don't know. I would have to delve into that more to really figure out what that myth is supposed to be about. But this is so not similar to that myth at all that, like, I didn't even take the time to really bother thinking if it fit the theme, because there's nothing similar about this book and the myth besides the fact that there is a guy named Apollo and a girl named Daphne. So getting into the story of this book, Daphne is an adopted child of a Spartan politician, and she has never felt like she's really belonged in Spartan society, and she tries really hard to fit in and do everything else. So during this competition where she is trying to win this race to find a stag, she ends up bumping into the goddess Artemis, who sends her on a quest with Apollo to go save the gods, the pantheon's magic. So there's lots of cameos from different Greek heroes like Theseus and the Minotaur, and I feel like there's somebody else in there, but this book is just like so forgettable to me that this is the most recent one I've read, and I've already forgotten so much of what happened in it. I guess I can't really knock this book too hard, because like if I had read it in high school, I would have loved this. This is very like girl boss feminism, and if I had read this in, like 2008, 2010, 2012, like right in that time frame, I would have eaten this up with a spoon. I would have loved this, but it's not really my taste anymore, and I just don't really vibe with this. And I kept comparing it back to Ariadne, which is a book I really, really enjoyed, and I think was a much better retelling of its original source material. And especially since it does this story specifically does interweave with like Ariadne and Theseus and the Minotaur and that whole situation. I just felt like it was much better handled by Ariadne, and like I said, this book just feels very early 2000s YA to me. So if you like early 2000s YA, you would definitely like this book. But that's not really my vibe anymore. So I think I would probably give this like 2 stars. Like it's trying, and it's there, and there's definitely an audience for this. I guess it's also a James Patterson book, which probably should have tipped me off, because like I haven't read a James Patterson book since high school. So probably should have gone into this knowing that it really wasn't gonna be my jam. So I hate to end this wrap up on a bummer, because I did enjoy a lot of the books I read. I had a 5-star read in this month, but it is what it is when you're doing things chronologically. Overall, I did have a pretty good month, and I am thankful in the Thanksgiving theme for all of the books I read and enjoyed. And if you have read any of these or are interested in any of these, definitely leave me a comment down below. I would love to have a conversation about them. And thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.